Eccoci, prepariamo allora.
So we are now getting ready for this second part of the third session. Which is really linked to the first part of this morning. The moderator will explain why Unfortunately, the ambassador of the Argentinian Republic to the Holy See has not yet come. Let's wait for him for a while, but in the meantime, we start our works. I would like to invite here on the stage our moderator, Mauro Mantovani, from the Salesian Pontifical University in Roma, rector of the university. So thank you for being here with us, Don Mantovani, Don Mauro, who will help us in this very demanding and committing afternoon ahead. Good afternoon, everybody. I am pleased to be here on this extremely important occasion, an event which is going on excellently. We're talking about presence. Well, okay, but not just presence here, but also presence of a lot of people who are following our works, connected, remotely connected, thanks to the new technologies from all over the world. Then we first of all thank God for this great occasion of the 150th anniversary of your institute, focusing on the challenges and perspectives, and especially today, as to presence.
So the topic of the presence, in order to see the perspective, how to things, the presence can qualify the educational, Salesian educational system. In order to be helpful from this reflection, I'm very glad to invite our speakers. I will have a small introduction, then we will have Paul Tighe. He was born in Dublin. Please come over here. He got a degree at the University of Dublin in civil law. He studied moral religion, theology, and he was appointed as a professor, and he also, back to 2017, and is the secretary of the Pontifical Council for Culture. His remarks will be on the communication in the times of digital algorithms. Then we will have the statements, remarks of Professor Bencivenga and also Professor Pasquini. It's wonderful that involve young people in our Congress, and also the results of the studies that they had here and concluded here in our university. Then we have Professor Bencivenga. She has been collaborating in several projects, and she worked in the project Gynai and State of Vulnerability. So this study was covered the canonization of Calabrini and Adezzati. Then Angelo Pasquini, he's a psychologist, is a former pupil of this university, former student of this university, and he will focus on the present of the adult and the perception of new generations. And then I will start my presentation by want to, in a certain way, raise the attention on what we're going to address later on. As Pietra was saying, there is a strict link between what we have done this morning and what we're going to do in the morning. It's beautiful to reflect on the data of our survey and the application of preventive system in different contexts, which also showed the educational presence, as the topic of the educational presence is on the one hand, is something that we feel really near, like a treasure that we have to disseminate for the church and the society, but on the other, is not really easy to experience in new experiences. So how can we implement it? I would like to introduce on the anthropological foundations of educating. We are living a time that is not only a change of time, but a change of an era, but a change of era. So not an era of change, but a change of era. So how do we have to interpret the education? How can we disseminate? How can we implement it? Then by thinking the task of the educators. So what are his priorities? And the expectations are very linked to its presence as an educator. Therefore, I would like to suggest you, and I'll give you some flashbacks, some flashes, some snapshots that are maybe turn out to be future projects. Is first, how we should reflect on the fact that it's should not taking for granted that we should stop educating. Not everybody is convinced that we can and we should educate. Second element, embracing relations. Yes, but. And then the third, the personalization of the difference. And then the fourth, between the catastrophe and the pact. Maybe we can add the winter catastrophe. I'm thinking about the President Chaire, that in his last remarks, he was talking about the winter, and so we should refocusing with anthropology in why to educate. In an article on 1984 of a Salesian assistant, Herbert Frank, psychologist, he was saying the uncertainty of the educator in interpreting his role or in realizing his pedagogical practice due to the obstacle posed by the current education situation. And if the educating was always a problematic thing, we have to admit that we have the question, the issue of on the meaning of educating. And today is really a critical issue, the fact that people are always have difficulties in finding the existing and also in finding the sense of educating and his necessity of it. These words are taken from Educating for the Good Life of the Gospel of 2010-2020. So these are always critical, important issues that will be focused on. The loss of the authentic meaning of educating and his absolute necessity. So I think it's an anthropological issue because at the roots of the educating, there is a false concept of self-autonomy of the human being, because it's able to develop itself without the others, without imposition coming from the others. That in a certain way should assist, support, assist in the sense, not in the Salesian assist, but in a certain way being those who are able to guarantee a self-developing without directly entering it. So why we should try to, that we should reply, how can the challenge of transforming them as such be concretely met? And this is the really deep meaning and of educating, and the fact that education should be done. If you think about the humanism of St. Francis de Sales, who believes in the natural resources and supernatural resources, even if he doesn't ignore his weakness. And therefore, as first element, we should think about what is the anthropological vision that is on the background. Could we, is not taken for granted for everybody that we should educate and we can educate. And this is a challenge. Second thing, then the second aspect I would take from the right consideration of the education from the anthropological point of view and pedagogical point of view. We have educational reflections that put at the center the relation. In our history, Salesian history is also in this sense. There is, it's paradigmatic from the figure of Francesco de Sales that practically that implemented the heart speaks to the heart, reason and reasonableness, different meaning of hands, heart, and reason. We should also sustain an exclusivity of the relation. There are also other categories, for example, identity, the difference, the specificity. Therefore, the attention of education implies that we have the radical differences should be taken into account of the individual subject, and this difference is also a role difference, and a good as well. In this sense, the topics of relations between female and male, parents and siblings are very meaningful. So it's important to grasp and protect or promote everything that is very much linked or characterized to presence, the so-called presence. We want the presence of a man, of a woman in a family, of a father and a mother in the for the children, to their children, and kids that must be not virtual, but real. We have a book of a researcher, American researcher, that she's talking about Tamagotchi kids. Tamagotchi kids, because there's robots, they can be programmed and they cause no problems. That's not obviously a joke, but what we could do to enhance differences there are good. And so between difference, persona and personalization, it's extremely important to think of education as a second generation. I'm sorry, a quotation of St. Thomas d'Aquino, because it reads as a second generation, so that a person can fully develop his potential, and that's typical of his own personality. A person must flourish as art, as a piece of art. God supports and think and want it with all those capacity features as an individual person, and therefore how can we overcome a standardized idea that is not personal idea of education? What kind of anthropology can we find behind it? What kind of vision of the person? We are talking about a relation, but a relation that is not deleting, but enhance differences, because in the difference of each of us, we will see that each of us has to turn in a piece of art, and this is the educational art. That means that a person is the very person that is flourishing by doing what he's doing. I do think that is a very topical point that's represent really a challenge. What we're doing here, our present here, what we're doing. Then overcome the standardization of education. And I would like to quote author Martia de Certina: the unicity and singularity is the identity of each person, requires educators and must look into the eyes that represent the windows of the soul, and so that each young person can feel different beyond his feature, his culture, characteristic, and personality, so that the development of virtues in each person and the decision that he will take in the future will keep on being a singularity in which each of us can play his own life that's unique, it cannot be repeated. I hope that I was able to deliver an input. The personalization as an element of the educating aspect of our commitment. So how can we read presence? Now I'm concluding of this introduction. There is also another element is that today we are required in a context that, we normally use emergency educational emergency in this global pact education. He used the terms the educational catastrophe. And I know that some data that you're working on it, they show that we have at our heart education in more broader and context. So in front of this catastrophe, how does it play? What weight play the relation between generations? Educating instead, it seems to be to accompanying the generation from one generation to another generation. Therefore, the presence that we have means alongside thrown to the future. And this is really the meaning of Salesian presence, because the Salesian presence has something to do in the FMA. They talk about the active present and with the testimonial presence, the presence in the assistance meant as method and attitude. We highlighted the catering of the accompanying as implementation of the presence. So how can we implement presence in the social context? And this is the really the question I would like to, with which we would like to conclude, and we further address to our following speakers. We hope that the presence that is meaningful, is physical, so in a certain way is always should be also mediated. Animators and testimonial. This presence not as a simple being with, there is a difference between stay with, being next, being with and for others as our authentic horizon of the presence. Therefore, we wonder, we ask, in the digital world, in the presence of the adult, this is possible to implement. Then, thank you, we'll give the floor to Paul Tighe. He will talk about the present in the context of the digital communication. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to be here today. I'm standing because I'm a professor, so I'm used to stand up. I'm sorry, but this is my attitude. I don't want to fall asleep. So also the sisters asked me to speak in English, which is much easier for me, and maybe for you it's better for you to listen to me. Maybe so. Please take your headphones for translation. Well, are you ready with your headphones on? Okay.
Okay. My invitation is to talk to you about what it's like to be an educator, how one should be an educator at the title that was given me at the time of digital algorithms, which I would simply like to call a digital world or a digital culture. I'm going to 6 points I want to make. The first one I want to do is to talk about digital culture, digital technology, and what it means from a cultural perspective. The second point I want to make is to ask, what does that mean for education? What does it mean to rethink the categories of education in the context of a digital culture? And then I want to simply raise 4 elements with you. I'll ask the questions. You're the experts on education. You can do the answering. One is I want to think about the figure of the teacher. Secondly, I want to think about what our pedagogical priorities are in a digital environment. Third one, think a little bit about what it might mean for the curriculum to be working in a digital environment. And finally, I want to suggest that some of what we're going to have to do is going to be countercultural. It will challenge some of the assumptions of digital culture. The first one, digital technologies and cultural transformation. I think we all know the digital technologies. I have this little device here, which tells me everything from where I am and tells probably my telephone over there where I am at any one moment, how many steps I take every day, how long I sleep at night time. It also allows me to access Siri, ask any question I want to, and get a reasonably good answer. It also allows me to communicate. And the technologies we have are changing. They're becoming cheaper, they're becoming more powerful, and they're more distributed. Everybody has them. And that's an interesting reality. But the really interesting thing is what particularly young people, but not just young people, have been able to do with these technologies and how these technologies have changed them. I have 15 nephews and nieces who range from 14 to 35. And they are from a different world to the world I grew up in. They have a very different way of gathering information. They have a different way of expressing themselves. They have a possibility of expressing themselves in ways we couldn't. They have a different way of relating to each other. They have a different understanding of friendship, perhaps. They have a very different way of forming community. And that's what I mean by the cultural change. It's a cultural change. I think it's not unreasonable to talk about an anthropological change. There's something very different in who they are and how they are, their way of being, and we have to be attentive to that if we're going to be an effective presence in their lives. The other thing is that it's a developing reality. We see where things are going, but we have no idea where the future is going to bring us. In particular, we are all aware of that the technologies are likely to bring about new forms of artificial intelligence that will, in the future, do a lot of the work that traditionally we have done. And one of the things that the people of the future will have to be is able to work side by side with machines that can learn, with artificial intelligences. They won't be displaced, but they'll have to live in partnership with very powerful devices. In the world of education, you'll have seen that already. I mean, the capacities for learning languages helped by digital resources. The capacity for doing mathematical calculations using digital resources. The platforms for collaborative learning have changed our world. Thankfully, I think COVID was a disaster and is a disaster, but it did, I think, force many of us far quicker into a digital world than we might otherwise have gone. And I think we can reflect on that and we can learn from that. So what I want to suggest is that if we had been gathered 100 years ago, we'd have been talking about transportation and mass communications and how they were going to change the world. But we would never have realized that down the line, we would have people living in distances from cities and commuting in and out to cities. We'd never have anticipated globalization. We'd never have realized the impact of transportation and globalization on our physical environments in terms of climate change. We wouldn't have seen that. So the invitation I want to give you is to think a little bit about where the digital may be bringing us so that we can be thinking in advance, anticipating what's happening, and able to contribute to our students and to others who will be part of that new world. In terms of education, I want to begin with a question that I've always been appreciative to. For 6 or 7 years, I worked in the Department of Communications in the Holy See with Archbishop Chaire. And the bishops would come to us for their ad limina visits. And the first question would always be, how will we use the new technologies for the new evangelization? And Archbishop Chaire would always reply saying, that's the wrong question. We're not talking about instruments or devices to be used. We're talking about a new world that has been constructed by the use of these devices and by the people who are competent in their use. So he said the real question is not about how do we use the devices, but it's about our presence. What will our presence in this new digital world look like? How will we be present as witnesses? How will we be present as people who support and care for others? How will we be present as educators in a world that is different? And also he used to always say, don't say new technologies, because you're making yourself old. Because for younger people, they're not new, they're normal, they're what they grew up with. So we think of this trying to be, it's a different world. Pope Benedict used an early word very on. He said, the digital world is a new continent. And when missionaries went into different continents in the past, they had to learn the languages, the traditions, the values, the customs of the people. And the same way we have to... A little slowly, okay. Sorry about that. We will try. So they had to learn a new language, new customs, a different way of being, to understudy the culture. And that's one of the things I think we have to do is we have to examine and see this new culture. See what are the people who live in that culture. What are the values they have? What are the strengths they have? What are the differences between them and us so that we can understand who they are and help them and support them. And that's what I call kind of cultural filtering. We look at the culture, we see what the strengths of it are, and at the same time, we become alert to what the limitations or weaknesses might be. And I think it's important to pause for a moment on the strengths. There's a danger sometimes we look only at the problems or the challenges. And one of the things we find is young people coming out in a digital culture are much better at expressing themselves in words, at expressing themselves in video and in images, at short communication, be that TikTok, be that Twitter, of an ability to express themselves in a way that we couldn't. We were passive, we were learning, we were quiet, the teacher did the talking. Now people expect to be able to engage, to ask questions, to comment, to reflect. So it's a less passive type, and that's a good thing. There are also people who have grown up being connected to each other. They're ready for collaborative forms of learning that perhaps would not have been as easy for my generation. They're open to global platforms that allow them to know and to learn from people from different situations. Again, if we're going to be serious, we have to value that as a strength. They also have to, I think one thing that is, I think, quite important for us is that we also don't romanticize the past. Sometimes you have somebody saying, the young students today, they spend their time on their devices and they're not studying like we did and they're not as attentive as we did. 40 years ago, I can assure the younger people, we did not spend all our times in libraries studying. We were able to find ways of being distracted, of being absent, even long before the devices came into our lives. So let's not romanticize the past. Let's not compare the best of the past with the not so good of the future. Let's be realistic in terms of our understanding. There's one other thing that I just want to say, and this is more my background as somebody who used to teach moral theology. The technologies are not simply, I said, they're not there to be used. We have to think about the world they have constructed. And that's also true at the level of, at a broader level. Pope Francis often talks about a technocratic paradigm in which he's saying to us, technologies are not something you can use for good, you can use for bad. They can. You can use them for good purposes, we can use them for bad purposes, but they're not neutral. The technologies already come as products of a commercial, economic, and cultural system. Some of the products we're using already have within them certain unspoken prejudices that we need to be alert to. Some of the products we're using, particularly in education, have been designed for profit motives by companies rather than simply as something to assist students. And they are also at times seeking to change the model of education into a more commercial or business understanding of education, which we need to be, I think, attentive to, not to slip into those presumptions. The second issue I want to talk about then is just as a figure, the teacher. I think teachers are at the core of education in many ways. Many of you are teachers. I used to be a teacher and probably still am more of a teacher than I like to think I am. It's still me at my best is when I'm teaching. And in the past, the teacher had the knowledge, and he or she dispensed that knowledge to the students. The teacher was, in a sense, the gatekeeper. Nowadays, the student has all the information at his or her fingertips. Almost every library in the world is online. Every significant publication is available online to the students. There are teachers who are far more qualified than any of us on YouTube giving lessons. So our students have access to a range of material, to resources that we didn't have. But the teacher is not redundant. But the teacher maybe needs to think again about his or her role. His or her role now becomes much more, I think, to be a guide, to help the students to find the better material, to be a mentor, to somebody who breaks it down, to accompanies them, to explain, to answer the questions. So is a guide and a companion in a journey of learning rather than simply the gatekeeper or the dispenser. There's a sense in which I think the teacher also will be a curator. We can help them by curating, by gathering, by bringing together the better materials, by becoming an interpreter, somebody who makes sense of that for them. And I'll come back to this later because there is so much material that the danger is that our students are overwhelmed by the material and not able to develop the capacity to own it, to think about it, to make it their own. So I think for the teacher is the person who can support them, working with them, having a certain expertise, becomes the guide, becomes the mentor. I think also that means it's really then much more the teacher, it's about what type of presence they are. What kind of figure are they? Great teachers, in my experience, were teachers who made me enthusiastic. Great teachers were teachers who could share their passions with me, and that's still needed. Somebody who can help the student to come alive, to see the value of what they're interpreting, to appreciate their own interpretation, in the best sense of education, to draw out of them the capacities. Not to see it's not about simply conquering all that material. It's about being able to engage with it and make it my own and see the connections and the links. So it's, watch that. One little story. My first time ever teaching was 1983. Just ordained, I was sent to a school in Dublin, Ballyfermot Senior School, in a deprived part of Dublin. It was an experimental school which was to help people to reach higher secondary education. Most people were leaving school at 15 or 16. This was to encourage them to complete the Irish equivalent of the Maturità with the hope that they might go on to university. So it was very new for that area. And in my first presentation, I gave a long talk about what education was and the benefits of education and why education was important. And I think I probably lost my audience immediately. But my parish priest, who was present, came up and he said to me, "Paul, that's lovely. Now," he said, "just one question." He said, in front of 500 students, he said, "Paul, will you love them? Promise me, will you love these people?" And somehow the teacher who has a care for, who has an unconditional regard for his or her students, who can see the value in people who maybe don't see the values in themselves, that's the figure we're going to need and continue to have with us. I think I'm about 10 minutes left, have I?
Yes.
Yeah. The pedagogical priorities, again, I'd make this simple. I think information won't be the problem. There is any amount of information. What we need to think more about is formation. How do we think about engaging people in making them active in their own learning and making them agents of their own learning? So how do we form people who have the curiosity, who have the methods of questioning, who have the ability to reflect in order to process, not even process, to deal with meaningfully the volumes of information that are at their fingertips? And that's my worry. I was teaching in a third-level college until about 15 years ago, and I could see the students were beginning to go online. And you would see these wonderful essays where they had processed loads of information. But they'd have a quote from this author followed by a quote from the other author, and the two authors were contradicting each other. And the students had never even noticed that there was a tension between the two. The fact that they had found it online meant they would use it. So how do we help them when there's so much information, it's coming at them so quickly, and that the risk is that they're expected to be, because the digital world expects rapidity, speed. So what I found was many students were cutting and pasting, were building something with the parts, but didn't see the whole or the togetherness or the links between the elements that we're bringing together. So how do we form people with the capacity to think? And that's, I think, intergenerational. Young people will teach us about where to find the information, about how to use the devices, about how to explore the internet. But what we need to contribute to them, I think, is a little bit about, well, sometimes you have to slow down, and sometimes you have to think, and a little bit the skills of logic and examination and reflection that are, in a sense, I think, countercultural, because there's an expectation in a digital world that you respond immediately. There's also, I think a thing that happens is a lot of the argumentation is more emotional than rational. So how do we help people to separate out what is emotionally very powerful from what is really worthwhile and has a logic, has a reason, has a validity to it? I think that's also, we know that young people are maybe, and rightly so, distrustful of older people, are uncertain, and yet perversely we have a celebrity culture where people on the basis of celebrity become authorities on all sorts of issues, often on issues on which they're not necessarily in any way qualified. So people were taking advice on whether to take vaccinations or not from footballers in Britain, became a real problem. Some of the top soccer players were refusing the vaccination for COVID, and many young people say, well, so how do we help them to break out of a culture that works about celebrity and emotion and get them more into these skills of reflection and thinking? And I know that you have that. How do we teach them an independence that they can verify, see the material, step back, analyze, think about it? And I think this is something then that becomes for me important in terms of what I'm going to call a lifelong learning. We don't know what the world of the future looks like. And even the old utilitarian notion that said you should teach the people the skills that they will need for employment, we don't know what the future will be. So thankfully that approach, a very transactional understanding of education, is redundant. What we do have to think about is we will need people who can think, who can reflect, who can realize what it is to be human, can think about whether we are going in the right direction or the wrong directions in our lives. So we're forming people who will be agents of the future, who will humanize the technologies and make sure that they are truly at the service of all. And I think that type of education, which is about the values, it's about the capacities, it's about not so much about skills, which may become redundant, but much more about internal capacities and a lifelong ability to be agents in their own lives. That, I think, recently I was at a seminar in the US, and they were talking about what they call the unbundling of education. The unbundling of education says there's no overall project. There's no vision of where we go. But we know you need to be able to code. We know you should be able to learn a different computer language. We know you should be able to use apps, so you should become an app. And instead of giving people a full education, you unbundle it and you give them the bits that you think are necessary, but you lose the person. The person becomes not a person, but a functionary, a cog in a machine, and you're training them to be, in that sense, simply an operative. So in terms of that then, and I'll conclude with two comments. One is on the curriculum. I think to put digital literacy on the curriculum so that our students become fully aware of the limitations of digital culture, meaning we know that people can be distracted. That's not an accident. That's not simply their weakness. That's the business model of many of the companies that are creating platforms that keep you there because that's how they make money. So how do we teach people to be more intentional in their own use of the machines so that they know better that they, rather than the devices, are driving their lives, giving them the insight into the rules of the game that are controlling them. So I think about intentionality. We also know that there has been an increase in polarization. Digitalization has created polarization. People disagree with each other very violently. There is no meeting each other, no learning from each other, no seeking to dialogue and to understand from each other. And that's not, can't blame digitalization for that, because I think some of that is post-modernity. As you said, there's no agreed understanding of what life is about and what makes life worthwhile. But at another level, it's promoted by digitalization. If I begin to follow certain sites, that's the only information I'll ever be offered. I'm left in my little echo chamber where I only hear the people who agree with me and the people who tell me the others are wrong. So we have to teach people to be deliberate in their openness to others, to think about encounter, to think about dialogue. And the final points, and this is just countercultural. One of the things that we have to recognize is that one of the sad results of increased digitalization has been increased inequality in our world. During COVID, the inequality, the gap between the richest and the poorest has become even larger. And think just in one educational context in particular, young people who were trying to learn at a distance from their own schools, in living environments that were not favorable. Even if they had a computer, they didn't necessarily have the space in which they could learn. Even if they had connectivity, they were sharing it with others. And a very interesting study done by the European Union, the Fundamental Rights Agency, has shown particularly how members of nomadic groups, such as the Rom, such as other travelers, became even more disadvantaged because they were being excluded from an education that was becoming ever more digitalized. As I say, the polarization, for me that is something. How do we, in the spirit of Pope Francis, educate people for an encounter, for meeting those who are different, from learning from those who are different from them, from understanding that the other person, in their difference, has something to contribute, has something that enriches rather than limits our approach. And the final one I'm going to say is just about meritocracy. The digital world is one in which people have to perform. You have to present the best image of yourself all the time. The pictures you show of your clothing, of your food you're eating, it's always trying to project this notion of I am successful, I am good, I have value, I have worth, because I can project this. And that, I think, is dangerous. And whatever else we do in our educational establishments, I think it's important that we give people, young people in particular, a sense of their own worth and value that is not dependent on the number of friends they have on Facebook, that doesn't depend on how many likes they get for their most recent TikTok, that doesn't depend on how many followers they have or how many groups in WhatsApp they're included in, that we give them that sense of a worth and a value that is not determined by market dynamics and by these extrinsic categories. And I think that's where I think religious education is at its best, rooted in our understanding that everybody has a value and worth that comes from them being created by God. We try and mirror that in our education, and particularly in our ethos, that what we do in our schools shows that we care for everyone, the successful, the not so successful, the difficult and the compliant, the awkward and the easygoing, and we try and give that sense of people of an intrinsic value and a worth that comes from us taking them seriously and taking their education seriously. Thank you.
Grazie di cuore a nome di
Thank
tutti,
you
a
very
Monsignor
much
Tighe
from Mr. Tighe for this extremely interesting presentation, stimulating presentation, the presentation of the technologies are not just tools, but just a continent where we are in. We don't have to make the past as an ideal thing, but a relation between the past and the student, the long life learning, LLL, the internationality and polarization, and the chance of recuperating an integral formation of the person. Thank you very much. I know that there are the possibility to pose some questions also on behalf of those who are connected remotely. So we are very glad also to receive their questions and in order to have a short dialogue afterwards. So really, we thank to have here also Maria Fernanda Silva, ambassador at the Holy See, from Argentina, ambassador from Argentina. And we do know she's very attentive to the educational world. I thought I wanted to give the floor to the other two speakers, Raffaella and Angelo. So Raffaella Bencivenga, Angelo Pasquini, and then we will have the ambassador. Raffaella and Angelo will introduce an extremely interesting element because they decided to deep the topic of the presence of the adult in the perception of the new generations, how young people see the presence of the adults. The floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you, Don Mauro. Thank you, everybody. After listening to the Mauro Mantovani Tighe on the educational presence, this presentation aims at recognizing and internalizing the perception of the adolescents in the relation with the adult and how the present is manifested in this meeting, shown in this meeting. The question I want to answer with an intervention is how is the adult perceived by the new generation? How they reflect on the educational action to implement and to promote a positive development of the new generations. In outlining the topic, we mainly refer to the studies and research conducted by the Youth Observatory of the Giuseppe Tonolo Institute of Higher Studies. So today, remarks will be divided into three parts. The first part, it will be define what we mean by new generation, and therefore the adolescents, including in so-called Generation Z. In the second part, some research contribution made between 2018 and 2021 will be summarized, and we will keep as a focus the relation and development of trust. In the concluding part, the third one, we will hint to the current educational challenges, above all to provide, where possible, food for thought for those who dedicate themselves to the educational relation with the adolescent world. So we will start now with Generation Z, adolescents, in line with what is presented in the European context. We will now refer the testimony of a teenager in his writing, "We young, in search of our place in the world." In short, like all human beings, adolescents are complex, and complexity can never be defined in a complete and ambiguous way. So even this description of mine is partial, and the subject are only the Western teenager I have known, and probably whom I'm part of. Probably a Pakistani or Nigerian teenager has a different situation with different, perhaps much bigger problems. However, I believe that teenagers share the search for something to believe in, something to live for, and in their place in the world. Or maybe this is the situation of every human being. And now, this guy hinted the difference of contexts. Even though the reality that present today refers to a specific context like the Italian one, this doesn't not necessarily mean that the today reality in other countries is so different from this one, from ours. At this point, we try to give a definition of adolescence. What is adolescence? When does adolescence begin and end? In the common sense, Augusto Popolari, the psychologist and doctor, would say that respectively this period time is between 12 and 18 years, with a variation from case to case. But there are those who call it refers to the long period preparation or moratorium outside the liberal work, and therefore outside the real personal autonomy to which young women and young people are forced in post-culture culture. And contrary, he argues that adolescence is prolonged in many cases up to 25 years old. In this phase, that the transition of the adulthood begins, in which choices begin to be made that will have implication in future to interpret how, without the aid of a family or school mediation, and to acquire the first responsibility and the first autonomy of life. In dealing with this phase of life, the current historical period, he refers necessarily to the Generation Z, because it corresponds that age group between 1997 and 2012. It stands in the middle between two generations. It precedes the millennials, it is those who were born between 1981 and 1996, and precedes the Alpha generation, that is those who were born after 2012 and who have a maximum of 10 years in 2012. Therefore, Generation Z, they are born shortly before the economic crisis, and from a demographical point of view, they are small in number. The past generation collects the legacy left by millennial generation, and it was raised with high standard of living and sometimes greater than of the grandparents and parents. Generation that desire to change the world and bring new initiative to the use of digital tools. Since its childhood, the Generation Z was the first to live in the era of Web 2.0. Matteo Lancini, psychologist, a psychotherapist, a professor at the University of Milan, defines the web not as much as a tool, but an environment where the adolescent builds his existence, defines how and what to portray to himself and to others, as it was said by Professor Tighe. A peculiar characteristic of Generation Z is a form of pragmatism, of utility, which crosses the various dimensions of the person. For example, rules are accepted only if they have a value, if their value is acknowledged, if they can be used in the relation without the other. Also, the way of understanding a relation has changed, intimacy, affections. The family begins to deal with aspects of fragility, conflict in the couples, separations, also repercussions with the children and so on. So there is a desire to experiment and to enter the world of work that's increasingly digital and entrepreneurial. At the same time, there is a great interest in life skills and in digital skills that allow sharing, collaboration, exchange of information to face the challenges of a constantly changing world. While remaining the complexity, however, remain constant between the generation and the differences, and the desire to give value to one's life remains present in adolescence in both generations. The search of stable points of reference manifests itself as a deep need, that sometimes is expressed underlined, and the adolescents express this, their need for adults or people almost the same age who precede them, and give them a direction towards this choice with which sooner or later they will be necessarily be confronted confronted, such as work, future, romantic relationships. Often in the adults there is the passion and the desire to get closer to the young people, but sometimes there is not the right tools. And knowing these new realities allowed us to better understand how to orient ourselves and how to orient the young people and their experiences to give meaning and quality to their life without being overwhelmed by sudden social changes. Now we are present the positive and the second part. In the analysis of the relation between other adolescents, we can cross the positive youth development, a perspective that invites us to look at the adolescence phenomenon from a point of view of resources, potential, and riches. Such perspective does not deny, does not want to neglect the elements of vulnerability or even a complex phase of life cycle. Rather, it integrates many aspects of adolescence and invites us to look at the adolescents not much as a shattered person, as more a kind of bearer of resources that can be further developed. So the plasticity, that is the ability of the adolescents to live the change, and the relations between the person and this context of daily life means the mutual interaction between the person and the context that take place along young people growth. From 2017-16 until 2020-21, data were collected for 5 years old through interviews with students aged 13, 19 years old. So we have to understand that there is the bias of this sample, and nevertheless, these results allow us to have information about adolescents, also their way of experiencing the pandemic. Data show the presence of existence of 5 subgroups and between the 5 so-called 5 C's, and so we note strict correlations between the competence, the cognitive, social, scholastic, and professional skills, the confidence, the general trust, recognition of one's abilities, and the connection, the positive relations with other people and organizations. And another interesting correlation between character, that is morality, integrity, inner values and respect for social and cultural norms, and caring, that is the capability of empathize and care for others. Another interesting fact is clear by comparing the various results of 5 years of results, and competence and confidence seems to be decreased. Connection, this variation, this is stable, while character and caring, so take care of, it seems to be increased, especially during the pandemic. So the lowest average of competence is in 2012-2021, can tell us how adolescents have a remarkable care for the others and perceive a high sensitivity. The decrease in competence score can suggest how adolescents perceive limits with respect to the ability and to feel especially effective. Adolescents have managed to maintain high values to care for others, in maintaining their quality with social bonds and social norms. So these, of course, are data that would require further study because it's not possible to hypothesize a cause-effect with the pandemic, but they give us the opportunity to notice a remarkable plasticity of adolescents and put in place resources necessary face the challenges that life puts before us. And now I'll give the floor to the colleague Pasquini. He will perform and present new data.
Bene. Buon pomeriggio a tutti. Grazie.
Thank you to everybody. Now, this part introduces the researches that have been carried out, quantitative and quantitative researches, so part of the results, but also introduce some reflection that were carried out by the young people, the relation that they have with the adult world. In one of the latest research by the Institute on the quality of the relations during the pandemic, the young people gave an answer on the meaning of the word relation. And they said, no, in my own opinion, respect is the basis of any kind of relation, at the basis of any kind of relations. In my opinion, just at the base of any type of relation, there is respect. That includes trust. Then when you know a person better, then there are all the other components. Maybe if a person makes you laugh or it's fun. So it depends on your features, on your character. So the respect of trust seem to represent the essential conditions for our relations, a condition that enable to be there over time. The construct of trust have been long been studied, because even before the pandemic, because it concerns a specific topic of Generation X and its relation with the social world and the adults. A quantitative and qualitative study on the description of trust in adolescence was developed, and from which interesting data emerged. The Italian youth that seems to have managed to maintain better level of confidence in the pre-pandemic period compared to other European countries, where, according to other researches, there is a lowering in confidence. The qualitative study, on the other hand, analyzed interpersonal trust, the closest relations to the young people, parents, relatives, teachers, brothers, sisters. So participants describe in the survey the relation with parents that goes beyond the specific situation and is based on the bond in itself. If you don't trust, quoting, if you don't trust your parents, you can't trust anybody. If you don't trust your parents, who do you want to trust? So this survey suggests that the family is not only the base where young people experience trust, but is also the place where the young people build development for future relationships. So the family is like a social gym that represents a privileged context for learning, beliefs, attitude, models, norms. And this is another person quote. I immediately came into my mind my mom, because I'm safe, in a safe place. I'm a place where I'm quiet. I put all my trust in the family. And a series of positive results in adolescence, for example, perception, affection, satisfaction on behalf of the parents, Italian parents. We're talking about the Italian scenario. So the boys feel like there is a strong and stable bond based on the awareness of being loved. However, there remains the question of family disalignment towards the affective pole of trust and hope, to detriment of the ethical one, based on the respect of the rules and different parental rules. Are important data. These are important data because for a harmonious and balanced development, both are necessary. And if it's overestimated the affective register, there is the risk that children are deprived of teaching social norms and rules of adaptation. Moreover, in this survey, the mother has, compared to the father, a statistically significant difference. Namely, mothers achieve a higher score in all relation dimension than fathers. So they show themselves more effective and more also ethical, despite the respective difference in parallel rules. When the adolescence grows from 16 years old upwards, affective possession decrease too, and those related to power antagonism with both parents, so they increase. So it seems that from the age of 16, the generalized confidence is lower than the experience up to the age of 15. And then here different hypotheses. For example, to quote Erik Erikson, the concept of crisis is an opportunity for growth to overcome an evolutionary problem for the construction of one's own identity. The process of autonomy of the adolescents, for example, implies an orientation towards the various social forms, friends, partner, informal groups, to the detriment of the family nucleus, family hold. In fact, if we take into account, we could hypothesize the presence of a period of distrust or betrayal. To participate within the quantitative survey, describe distrust in this way. You feel bad when you see a person that you're trusting doesn't reciprocate. For me, it was a shocking thing. Trust is characterized by the presence of risk. This highlights how much the fiduciary relation is not given a priori, but requires to be redefined from time to time. And specifically, the fiduciary relationship is per se a paradox, because it's linked to the fact that there is always a feeling of insecurity given by the openness toward the bond that can be with adults and with the friends group. If I trust, I can tell him. In the end, it will happen. So it may happen that maybe this trust is betrayed, but I trust him, I tell him, and then what he wants happen in the end. So in the relations with the school teachers, the adolescents manifest a confidence based on the rule has a complete in that particular subject. With professors, you have to trust them because they teach you something. Personally, I don't like our Latin teacher, but I trust him because I know that he knows those things. As for the role, they give trust. The adolescents who involved in this research seem to have perceived less confidence from teachers during the pandemic due to the numerous interrogation exams since they returned to school. So those few days we could see at school were full of checks, full of questions. But do they know what difficulties we face? What are they doing? To do trust, ma be online doing the prevention that day in the dark. This specimen is no coincidence. When they ask to evaluate the skills of the teachers, adolescents gave great importance to the moral relationship. Students in the relation with teachers seem to have confidence for the expectation of the role and training, but at the same time, alongside to the traditional qualifications, they ask to have, above all, relational qualification, ability to know and be motivated. And that is why the figure of the teacher is not only the one who conveys information, it's a multifunctional professional that is responsible, who is responsible for the full-fledged promotion of the adolescents. These statements suggest us how much interpersonal trust can be promoted or inhibited by teachers and parents in the relation with the adult. So the personal human aspect of the teacher and the parent is introduced, which is perceived by the adolescents as an engine of trust for his development. These humanities touch on aspects that fall basic and generalized trust, as the ability to see others as trustworthy people starts precisely from the set of experience that the adolescent has experienced. I believe, let's say that if I trust a person, I think this is mutual, it's reciprocal. The fact that I trust leads the other to trust me. I trust him because he trusts me. So this reciprocity is essential because it enables a relational openness with the other. So those who are the custodians of the trust of others can choose whether to return trust or respond with distrust. So this relationship, freedom, the other can choose whether to make the relation flourish or disappoint expectation, creativity because he can positively surprise those who have placed trust in him, and being giving because a relation that goes beyond the value of use of personal interest and leverage people's resources of conditionality. The other feels that he has a positive debt and shows himself worthy, credit of trust, and placing further trust in the relation. Another young person reply, I quote, and then when I give trust and trust to God, I hope that I know that it come out just like that, because anyway, the first thing when I trust is that I believe and hope a lot in people, and therefore I hope that are really reliable person. So such stability allows adolescents to explore a relational world, sometimes made of risk, uncertainty, emotions, which young people experience for the construction of their own identity. Now, we would like to sum up the results of the survey, even if it's limited, give us the opportunity to grasp multiple food for thought, the new of the adolescent's world, and they allow you also to renew some new educational challenges, a new possibility of relation, to discover a new possibility of relation, the perception of good trust in adults, and the remarkable ability to adapt in the face of the health emergency invite us to look at adolescence not only as a delicate and critical phase of life, but also as a full-fledged phase full of resources that really ask per se to be valued. This presupposes highlight that educators and teachers dedicate specific attention to the management of emotions and the ability in conflict management. The results as regards the relations between adolescents and adults affirm a lack of alignment of the affective pool to the detriment of the ethical one. The educational challenge for harmonious development will be to propose to parents an integration between the two poles. The parental response consists in knowing how to maintain the limits and the norm, together with the ability to be more flexible, to make normality coexist with affectivity, principle of reality with pleasure, structure with the structure. The norm alone oppresses and humiliates. Affection alone does not contain. Rules and love must be mixed. It's good that the entire final system acquires flexibility, namely, it should be able to adjust the psychological distances between its members, between moment of distance, other of closeness, accepting the challenges. So it's not an easy task because it requires a paradigm swift. But switch to the question: what I can do with my children, or more? What does my children do? My children need, and also what did I need when I was a teenager? So here a theme of adult formation between the educators, parents that accompany children, volunteering, association, sports practice, ecclesial participation are all realities where adolescents can grow in openness to social world. In quality insight, adolescents show that they recognize the difference between their friendship and the parental relationship and know what are the specific issues that they can be addressed. So the relationship with adults are closely intertwined, and for a good openness, it is essential that relations are like a safe haven. To leave Rome to children, they peer relationship, to have the exploration of peer relationship. So, in the light of this, what's been said so far, we realize that it's important the encounter with the other, and also the value as such trust trust, hope, freedom, the limits, the resources that are all present in human beings have to be considered. Pope John 23rd affirms youth seek a heart that understands rather than light that illuminates. This just to confirm how important the humble present, characterized by active listening, is important, the humble present. So it's important to give space to a vital new household that reminds us at the same time what we are, simply human. So what we are doing is in line with a positive youth development that invites us to look with different eyes what the children are living through. Trusting young people means giving credit of trust, and this means of the typical of the meaning of the positive youth development. These acknowledge that they are the only ones because they are the promoters of the challenging world. Thank you.
Thank you, Raffaella, Angelo. It was very stimulating, and this conclusion provided 4 important pedagogic principles, which are extremely interesting, and they are indeed a great stimulus for all of us. And we wonder which is now our role. What can we do? As you rightly said, the adolescent who is carrying resources to be developed is a great responsibility for us. We have to understand how to support the youth to building him herself, the society, the church, and his position in this society. Thank you so much also for your precious experience, because you have spoken about trust and confidence. You have spoken about this confidence of former students. We also heard the voice of the young students, and now you have completed this frame, let's say. So there are a few minutes left for a debate with our speakers. We said earlier that Her Excellency will speak after the break, but anyhow, now we have some time left for some questions. Do not hesitate to also ask questions on the chat. There is also the possibility for all of you here to stand up and ask your questions. So please feel free, don't worry. And I know there is a microphone around here, so if you need it, just raise your hand.
Prego, qui.
Okay, please. Thank you for your precious contributions, and thank you for having again spoken about technology, which is increasingly present in our daily life, and that will always be present also in our future for sure. My question now is just a consideration. Well, how to accompany we as adults, a particular kind of adults. We have different ages. I'm not really inside the technological framework. I have kids, I have nieces, nephews, I have contacts, young people around me who belong to this digital world. So how to keep up the pace with this changing world, how to live in this world, and how to accompany at the educational level all these young persons in technology which is continuously changing. Thank you. We have also received a request by the translators to please speak slowly. I apologize. We will speak slowly starting now. Sorry. Okay. So thank you for this reflection. Okay, the answer is given also by our considerations on how to accompany these persons living a different experience. There was a Z generation, which is totally different, and what I would like to say is that it is important to live for the moment. Whatever we can bring them, we will bring them for sure. Okay, we don't belong to the Z generation. We have some difficulty in speaking the same language as of that of the youth. We acknowledge this limitation, and we should ask the youth to help us in adopting this new way of being, this new literacy, so that we can have a dialogue with them, because they live the moment, and therefore they have, in a way, the perception of whatever they need, what they need. So when we don't understand what they need, is the only way out is asking them. But we don't have to have this attitude like top bottom. It's a problem that we have to approach at the same level, a problem that maybe also I experienced when I was younger. But since you are another person, please help me in understanding how I can help you, how I can speak your same language and knowing your same reality and working together with you. So sometimes, okay, we could say we are educators, we always have the answer back, but maybe the only answer back is let's find together the answer. Let's work hand in hand. Okay, there is a bit of fear, of course, but we should question ourselves as educators and professionals in education, and improving the solution of this problem, of course.
Mi dispiace deludere l'aspettativa di una risposta certa, ecco.
I have to be honest now, and this response regards the society, which is a changing society, so there is not prepared answer. Data show us that there is an ethical and an emotional course that have to mix together. It's not sufficient to leave the youth do what they feel is better for them, but on the other hand, they should also do what is better to do. So find a kind of calibration. Matteo Lencini was speaking about a kind of environment, the world. The web world is a real environment where they socialize, when they experiment everything. So we should provide educational proposals which are just on their environment. And we as a school, volunteering associations, oratories, we should be open up to these new environments of comparison and growth. I'm talking about Italy. They are youth who heard 2 years ago, you have just to spend 30 minutes on the social media, but during the pandemic they were told something totally different. You have to be present online, otherwise you will look absent at the school. So they had to be there in front of the PC. They had to understand this change. So we should provide for them an environment which makes available for them a possibility for having a dialogue. And now I would like to talk about of your interventions. I am happy of your research, your study that shows a great educational commitment, and I would like to point out that studying psychology in a faculty of educational sciences, that holds this course in educational sciences, offers indeed a special path regarding the attention towards the person. Since morning, we are keeping on repeating continuously, which is the importance of the category of presence, listening, and all these nice words, Angelo. While concluding the intervention, you said something important: presence. Humble presence characterized by the active listening. So my question is this an expression that you made up on the basis of the responses that you received through your studies, or is it an expression that you have found in other previous published researches? Because I believe it's extremely crucial to us, because we really attribute a great importance to a presence which has to be humble, and also listening at the same time should be active and well motivated.
Grazie, allora voi
So thank you. Well, the answer now. Then we have a question for Monsignor Tighe, which we received online. Then he will answer. Well, we combined the research data regarding mainly active listening. We wanted to point out the humility, humbleness, because it was important for us to remind how educated he is, a person who accompanies the students, not just a person who is there only, but a person who knows how to use and improve the resources, and in her humbleness is able to understand the value of the person in front of him, in front of her. So this is what has inspired us in combining these new thoughts. So starting on now, we can report this sentence and say it's yours. Okay, Paul, how to educate teachers as mentors, as you said, of new generations? Which are the skills, which are the competences that we have to improve and to form in a way? Thank you. It's very difficult to reply to this question. Sorry. Well, okay, I like to ask questions, but now it's time for me to also answer. Well, for me, well, I have to say, I've been teaching for many years. There is something mysterious in the relationship between the teacher and the students, which means that the teacher is useful for teaching students how to walk. And step by step, students start to run, and maybe even faster than the teacher. But what a mentor is for me is one who is able to help the student in finding out new and proper methods for interacting with this bulk of information and the information of teachers. Well, I would like to say that the fundamental thing is that it's important to teach them how to analyze and assess and criticize. I will give you an example. I taught in a small school in Dublin, Mater Dei Institute of Education, the place for the education formation of religion teachers. Well, the students arrived there when they were 18, 19 years old. And the very first year, we started to ask them to write down a few things. And then we have found out that they started
to do this cut and paste. They were surfing the net, they found the right article, they have cut and they have pasted on their essays. So we decided to abandon this method. In the very first year, every week, we have chosen for them an article, like a 10, 12 pages article, something easy for each subject. I thought morality, another was teaching dogmatic, another education. So we have chosen an article, then we have asked them to write with a pen, with a pencil, write on a paper, a page. And then handwritten page, half a page, by saying what the article was about, just a sort of a presentation, a summary, let's say. Then, second part of the page, what did I like in this article? Then another part, what I didn't like, what I disliked of this page, a few words regarding this. If my mother would ask me, what is this article about? Well, it's about this and that. So we taught them how to analyze the information, not to get lost in the information, but to be masters of the information and being able to master a high-level text, so to learn how to think on their own and to write also, handwrite, and step by step, not to be focused on the broad dimension of the information, but on the quality of information, which is extremely important. That was our focus during our teaching, analyzing and understanding. And for me, in theology, it's extremely important to be able to express in a clear and accessible language what they have heard, because most of the time the hardest part is to express yourself. So for a teacher, it's very easy to be hidden behind difficult and scientific high-level words, but being able to share ideas with a clear language is not for all. Then I heard you saying something very nice, and there is an old saying in Irish, in my language, that you don't know, means to praise or give value to the youth, and they will never make you upset. And another thing which I heard while you said that we have to respect the differences, don't pretend like you are young. You must be reliable. You must be there for them, but you are not them. So for many teachers, of course, it's important to learn how to teach, but it's important what you are than what you do. This is fundamental. Thank you, and sorry if I took too much time. Yeah, thank you.
Well, you touched a set of issues that we really feel close to our spiritual experience and to our Salesian educational experience, so thank you so much. So, please, another question from the audience here and another question online. We will reply. And then the break. Thank you for your speeches. Good evening, everybody. I would like to mainly address to Raffaella and Angelo, because I really liked the category of the youth and adults is about respect. And I was thinking, respect Well, it's an easy concept, but a big concept also. I don't know if in your research you highlighted what it implies, because maybe for us it has a meaning, welcoming, respecting differences, love for the others, but maybe for you it has another meaning, because there also can be relativism. There can also be other words which are the weakest side of the word itself. I don't know if in your research you have highlighted something, a different nuance of the word respect. This is my question. In the research made through the focus groups, what they were searching for was how students were understanding the word relationship, so they had to associate to the word relationships and adjectives, and among them there was a part regarding respect and trust. So the research was analyzing that specific area, and it was regarding trust mainly. Of course, students have different concepts regarding respect, but what they were enhancing specifically in this research was respect and trust, hand in hand. For students, respect and trust were almost the same thing. They were really close to each other. So I respect the other if I also trust the other person. If that trust is lacking or missing, I don't respect that person. So there is all the parts relating to the risk in giving trust to the other. So I trust you, but then if you don't give that trust back, I suffer. Then I will suffer, and students really leave that experience as a betrayal, really. So respect and trust were really interconnected for our students. So then we ask Raffaella a very fast reply to this question, which is connected to the previous one. We spoke about importance of trust and how it's easy to fall in distrust also. So as educators, how to help distrust youth who don't feel the support of adults and families in rebuilding self-confidence and confidence towards the adults themselves. It's a wonderful question because it's a very delicate issue and topic. Trust is a value, it's a delicate topic, and when it is broken, it's difficult to put two pieces again together. So it is important to start by presence, what we said during this round table, being there, present and ready for dialogue without being too much. So being there, but on tiptoes, let's say, where we do not ask the student to trust us, but through our presence, as Monsignor said before, through our presence it's important to give our example, and through our presence we can get step by step pieces of trust while giving self-confidence also to the student we have before us. So if we want to get trust, to be trusted, we have to trust others, and we have to help students being self-confident and bet on himself or herself, so that they can start a virtuous circle in self-awareness, self-consciousness, and trust towards the outside world, and wearing those magic specs which give you trust in all the people living close to you and surrounding you. So giving trust before receiving it. So Thank you.
Dunque, si è
Thank
parlato
you.
anche di elasticità
We
e
also
di
spoke about
plasticità, no? Ma noi
elasticity
saremo
and plasticity,
rigidissimi
but we
nel
will be very
riprendere i nostri
rigid in
lavori alle
restarting our works
17:15
at
con il
15
saluto da
past
parte
5 with the
dell'ambasciatrice di
remarks
Argentina presso la
of
Santa Sede
Excellency, the
e
Ambassador of
ancora
Argentina,
un
the Holy
grazie
See. So
sentitissimo a
again,
Monsignor
thank you.
Paul Tighe, a
Heartfelt
Raffaella
thanks to
e
Monsignor Paul
Angelo per
Tighe,
i loro
Raffaella and
interventi.
Angelo for
Grazie.
the remarks. Thank you.
Bene, allora prendiamo posto per dare inizio alla seconda parte di questa sessione
So please take your
pomeridiana.
seats so that we can start our afternoon session.
Lieti di ascoltare un breve
We are proud
saluto
of
da parte
listening to the short remarks of the Ambassador of Argentina at the Holy See,
in questi giorni anche per la
who is
preparazione
very
della
engaged in these days for the preparation of the canonization of Calabria and Zati.
L'Argentina
Argentina is the
nostro Santo Padre, il Papa
country
Francesco,
of origin of Pope
e per
Francis,
gli italiani e non
and
solo
for
terra
Italians
di emigrazione,
is a land of migration and welcoming of our migrants. So before the millennials, there are the so-called digital migrants, and I think many belong to this category. And then, Excellency, the floor is yours. Thank you for your presence. Then we will start the remarks of this afternoon.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Buongiorno, buenos días, buenas tardes.
Good morning, good evening.
Muchísimas gracias por esa presentación.
Thank you so much for this presentation, for these nice words. Wow, it's great to see you here. Many thanks for this great presentation. Thank you for inviting me in this wonderful Salesian house, the house of Mary, the help of Christians. As Father rightly said, we are in the middle of the sanctification period, the preparation of our soul and our heart for reaching to the canonization of Don Artemide Zati, Don Sati, the first Salesian who will be sanctified without passing through the martyr, because he was a lay person, our brother Zati, the support of everybody, the friend of everybody, the sentence by which we are introducing him in the networks, on the networks, is his own sentence. I believed, I promised, I took care of all of you, because he promised something to Mary the help, and when he fell sick, and he after a while, he was again fine. So he was cured by the love of Mary. So for whole a lifetime, he was inspired by something which also the Salesians know. So being present in full for the sick persons, for those the most needy persons. So with this devotion, full devotion, and with his great mood, he was always joyful and happy. For example, when he entered a room or in the big rooms of the halls, he was used to say, "Are you still breathing? Are you still all alive?" So he had a great humor. Artemide Zati, our brother, and also Pope Francis is a devotee of Brother Zatti, and last Saturday, after we had the benediction, the grace of sharing in a city, the meeting on economy of Francis, we were recalling the devotion towards his devotion towards Don Zatti regarding the vocations which were missing, and all of a sudden there were some vocations. Then we have shared this moment of happiness and joy with the Salesians, with all the devotees of Mary the Help. It's a real feast. It's a great celebration for Argentina, but also for the Universal Church as a whole. And it's really marvelous that our Pope has chosen person coming from the health sector, these health operators who are indeed so important in this moment, and they played a crucial role during the COVID-19 pandemic. So he has chosen this sanitary work, this professional from the sanitary world who faced all these issues. We have the Beato Zafferino, I think, who wanted to become a priest. And for example, TV at the time was a disaster, and Zafferino wanted to become a priest. Then he didn't manage, but he was in the hospital where Zatti was also hospitalized. He wanted to, and Zatti took care of Zefferino, and this is marvelous. He was a really pious person. Everything happened in that hospital. Zatti was taking care of Zefferino. So the saint took care of the Beatus. Life is so beautiful. Faith is so beautiful. So thank you for giving me this chance, for allowing me to be here with you. You were talking earlier about respect and its meaning for the youth nowadays, because the youth will believe in someone and in something. The biggest manifestation of it before the pandemic was celebrated by the Episcopal Italian Conference with a lot of 70,000, 80,000 young people in Piazza San Pietro to see the Pope. I was among them, even if I was not young, just to listen to his words, and they were just young children with this big cardboard saying, Francesco is uno di noi, Francis is one of us, and they really recognize themselves in the Pope, and they believe in him, and the mystery is there. It means being true. They believe in him because they see his smile, eyes, his body, because he's always out of the box. He thinks out of the box. He's always so blunt and direct, so marvelous. And many times mothers and fathers, my daughter is 34, but sometimes mothers and fathers and educators, well, say something, but immediately after a second they do something else. So it's a big contradiction, and in this contradiction we are not so that much credible, let's say. When we say we have to live in a honest way, in faith, then you ask me to call that friend, I will pay you, I want to skip the line, but please help me skipping the line for entering the Vatican museums, for example, and talking about that contradiction when we say just leave the tablet, leave the PC, don't touch the mobile. Then the COVID comes and we say, no, take the mobile, be on the net, take your phone. These are contradictions, of course.
COVID-19. Tápate la cara, ponete bien la
Like,
mascarilla.
for example, we give a lot of instructions which are indeed contradictions, and we have to be aware of that. We have to say that it's extremely difficult to tackle with these contradictions, and as to technology, there are many. I also believe that it's extremely important to consider all these aspects, but we can also talk about theory. There have not been big technological changes. We can see a kind of our ancestors have seen this big fire lighted up, but we were unable to understand from where it all started. But we have to feel what is happening. We have to be present with our body, and not just write down what is happening. We have to experience and explain what we are experiencing. We must be more natural and spontaneous. Thank you for this opportunity.
Grazie. Grazie Eccellenza per queste parole che non sono di circostanza. Veramente.
Thank you for these words, Excellency, wonderful, touching words. So I would like to introduce also Sister Piera, even if you already know her.
Allora dico solo il titolo.
Okay, we'll just say the title, Educational Presence in Preventive System. Thank you.
Eccomi.
Here I am. Thank you very much for such introduction. I was thinking that in the Fiorina, educational remarks was really a successful one who led him to to be a saint. So, we know that we received so many inputs throughout this day. We would like to add a couple of new ideas that cannot but enhance and some concept where we draw from our experience, in particular in these days and in this day. Maybe we will have some answers to some discomfort, but we will add new answers and maybe new proposals. The educational presence in preventive system of Don Bosco and Mother Mazzarella, for sure, is a central pedagogical discourse. In fact, there is no education without relations, without mutual presence. We saw that the human being is molded by bonds and conditions and effects in the environment. So it's clear that when we speak of simple presence, we are not just talking about of a presence that is oriented by intentionality of let the other grow and mature in all his dimensions. Therefore, it must be clear the intention in the educator, as well as the pedagogical discourse is also important in the preventive system of Don Bosco. And there is a link of authentication between the effectiveness of the method and the quality of the educational presence. As is with this, with its concept being there, but this being there, we really introduce this concept many times, is that the educator and the group of educators put in place a system of relation that constitute the fundamental basis for promoting students, the growth of students. So an educator who makes himself available to young people, inhabits the world by participating in their lives has all the main elements of the preventive system. There were many reading of this concept, both from the SDB, Don Mauro said something about it, and also on the female side. This topic is very much felt in our faculty. So in the last few years, we have been faced face it from several points of view, from Salesian pedagogy, science of education, and historical developments. So I divided my report in two parts. In the first, the features of the Salesian educational present in the founders, so John Bosco and Nonna Mazzarella. And I will says that I skip some parts of my presentation. The second part will be a kind of confrontation with some contemporary challenges. Now, starting by Don Bosco. The presence assistance implies multiple meanings in its experience. The personal experience of Don Bosco as a young person, as a founder. The last one we will not address it. I will dwell upon simply on sharing with you some suggestive images. You know that Don Bosco was a huge narrator. He was able to express concept through images. So through his sources, we found really flashback that describes who really is an educator. And in particular, in his pamphlet, in his preventive system, he described the educator as a watchful eye, a friendly voice, a loving father, all expressions that in a certain way call and evoke dense elements that help grow people to young people to grow. And also other images, like, for example, the farmer who does not abandon his seed after planting. Instead, he surrounds it with care, and so he waits for the fruit. But if it does not arrive, if it doesn't have the result of the fruit, is not discouraged. He's also a tailor who knows the fabric of the young people, so enhancing their potential. He knows how to skillfully treat it in such a way that he can really make a beautiful dress to present to the Lord. And then at the same time, he's also a musician. So, next to the original harmony, he already think about music. The music is not there yet, but he's trying really to strings to vibrate the right tones. He was also a musician. He's also a shepherd to whom a flock was entrusted. So the fact of being protective and also he's a promoter, because he promotes through persuasion and goodness. These elements are already there. And it's like he's also an angel who's connect the earth and the sky. So these are all expressions which tell us that the presence of the educator is not only physical, spatial, physical, and of time, but also spiritual and pedagogical one, able to create a profound communicative channel which touch upon all the different phases of a person, the affective dimension, love, that maybe is not like this, but there's a Salesian love, or either is a reasonable love or is no love, because the Salesian reason is a reason full of love, otherwise it's no love. So we have to think about this connection, otherwise we will not understand the preventive system. So this kind of education talks straight to the core, to the heart and to the intelligence, and prepares to life. Therefore there is a presence which help to look forward, to prepare the young people crucial for the future. The pedagogical value of this education has multiple forms, and it develops in two movements: the aspect, the defensive, protective aspect, the doing against, so everything that disrupt the bridles, and at the same time, it's the one that is promoting, so the one that enhances the potentials. And this morning we didn't dwell upon much on the project aspect, in the preventive aspect, because put at the core of these analysis the resources of the youth, but also the aims. Remember the honest citizens on times, and also verification. At the base of complex of this construct, of this paradigm, there is the realism of the anthropological Christian vision, and is the things that we are in the middle, being able to keep distance from the spontaneous approach. So for those who think really that the growth is just spontaneity, at the same time of the repressive approach that thinks that a person is not capable of self-determining himself. So this really a very important aspect of Salesian education. So when we're talking about the word assistance, we are talking about many meanings, and therefore it's, from a pedagogical point of view, it's a term to be translated, so a constant ongoing presence. This is the very first task of the educators, being as much as possible with youth, being there but discreetly. So means many facts. They do not have to stifle the youth people. Don Rinaldi, who was quoted as youth great educators, in the Salesian courtyard, youth have thousands of eyes are observing them, but they don't care because they feel free. Means it's exactly the place, the courtyard where young people can play. Is also active the education because it has a positive and constructive approach. So the presence is not only active, is also proactive. For example, by whispering some words. And this, in a certain way, suggests the taste of the alliance, because it's not only preaching there. There is a sort of openness, and the youth can, the educator can enter the youth and have a relation. So the personalization is the really secret to become the master of the youth heart. The love is acknowledged, and then the educator is also a consecrated one. Therefore, not only doesn't have to have other commitments that make him far from the youth, that put a distance between him and the youth. So it's in a certain way the true theological place. So he really wants the best. At the same time, take into account many variables that doesn't depend on the educators. It's also open to the context and maintain hope. This preventive system that is lived as presence is also present in the Maria Domenica on the first FMAs. Be careful. Before meeting Don Bosco and his method, we can see that really here can document the real value added that Maria add to this education. The present is her present comes from her inner pedagogical vocation. So the educator is something that the educator has inside of him, in himself, and it enriches with the practice. But let's think back to the San Silvestro FMA, and then with her oratorio. So we can really assist at a systematic development, not a linear development. So this is a cardinal point of her strategy. Remember, she's educator and formator of the nuns, so both aspects. And she has also a feature, a special feature. The feature is never enough. For example, she said we have studied, we have our oratory and our lab, but then when she, when the sisters go home, the girls go home, they abandon at their own, and she is really not quiet for this reason. She said that really I have to spend as much time as I can with them, because in the middle of the night I awake and I think, how can I improve tomorrow? So in this typical feminine mode that expressing the educational presence, there is also the central presence of the person. In Monese, we know there is not just a mass, but in Nizza, yes, indeed, it is there. So the first skill, Salesian skills, is to get aware of each girl. What does it mean? Studying her in a pedagogical language, we call it a systematic observation. So thanks to a pedagogical eye, try to understand where actually resources are. And she was also a farmer, but the garden where she was in suggests her further way of attention. So she, for example, observed plants. Plants in a garden has all the right places. And here there is a link between the garden of the heart, because the first things to work on are convictions, orientation, dispositions, working on the heart. But together there is also the care for the environment. A garden is also a community that is can compare to a nest. For us, it's more. Don't forget, those girls were orphans, so they found their nest. Means when you found their nest, means you found your home. But then that nest, we know that the birds, when the early birds, then they leave when the mother decided that they should no longer be there. And this is really, here we can see the dimension of prepare ourselves, themselves, and then go. This is a reality that has to be implemented by taking into account the challenges and difficulties of times. I just hinted at the fact that the Institute, in her educators and in her pedagogical reflection, reread in a second time along the time. And so in my research that occurred some years ago, I highlighted as the educational life in the Institute is a constant, is a discrimination of our method. So by starting from the exemplarity of our model, where the adult plays more a major role, she insists very much on the relation quality of the educator. And then the Institute shifted to other models at the beginning of the 20th century. On the one hand, the tension of preserve such model in front of the new challenges at that time. Care was, and then also the dialogue with the activism. We know after the World War, this model put once again at the center of the research infantry and the master. And then back to the 60s, the new methodology placed more attention on the student, the she student, and to try to supporting also the one dimension of the relation. And then through the 70s and 80s, there was a re-elaboration of the model. We use a new term, the relations. So a term that, sorry, I didn't get it, was this term. So the switch to new categories and new relation anthropology, which use the categories as empowerment, reciprocity, and enrichment of the education relationship. But today, with the 24th chapter, we got to a more mature approach of the rereading, second rereading. That can be read as paradigm of the care. This chapter is really worth of being further studied, and there are many researchers actually that are studying it. We had Bernardo Toro tomorrow and other speakers. There are many different articulation of these studies, so we should really care for the dialogue with different cultures. Second part, I'm maybe a bit pretentious when I'm saying that I want to have a dialogue with today's challenges, with some challenges, because it is important not to say, well, I was great, what a wonderful thing, but actually educational process, educational practice, in order to be actual, must be in dialogue not only with the charisma as is gifted to us, as well as with the context, as well as from the challenges that coming from the youth and from a broader picture, with a certainty that the preventive system is a huge resource, not only for us, as well as for the whole context, for the all pedagogical cultures and societies. It was already said in many different ways. I would like to hint once again at some aspects, but we could say for certainty that among the main difficulties we encounter today in the educational process is distress, youth distress that involve the youth but also adults. And our colleagues today talk about the fear on behalf of the adults to enter the youth world, because the first menace is when two generations get apart. And, for example, once for the hyper-technology that is really concentrated in the detachment of the two generations that aims very much at speed, doesn't, everything is forced, everything is quick, everything must give an immediate result. In the relation is not like this. So you have to be patient. You have to wait. People cannot just pull actions. You have to wait, and therefore there is a lack of dialogue because there is not enough time. By doing this, the basic So the couple anteriority and authority and anteriority is rich of conquests. But unfortunately, in the adult world, there are not, let's see, these conquests are difficult. The mental authority, a project, secure project of life is not a secure data for the youngs, the youth. So, and therefore, the adult has no instrument to propose new things. Another aspect is the intergenerational detachment. Pope Francis told us the lack of alliance, solid alliance. We do know that there are many debates between adults and teachers, also outside school. So this disagreement, this alignment between the educational figures, it's really a menace, a threat, which lead to the consequence of an adult that on one side it becomes a bit infantile, so it remains a bit in the adolescence, and a minor that instead becomes an adult. That so that in a certain way has the burden of being an adult, so must grow quickly. So in a certain way, the classical symmetry, in a certain way, burn out. And we have the classical dysfunctional cases of the parents that is a friend and so on. Why? Because the transition towards adult, it's much complex to the adult age. So, and the affective education is much complex. Today we have no valid models from this point of view, and we said in these last few days this anthropological loss, and then this diversity between female and men are completely cancelled. Today there is this liquidity, there is no easiness to identify in the traditional roles, and that makes things more harder because growth is information, but in the growth there are no secure reference. As well, at the same time, the fragmentation of work is precarious, is time limited. We can achieve a balance from an economic point of view, and then everything can be lost also in the family itself, and this makes insecure. So adults are floating between controlling with no discretion, that Gosco was saying, with that hyper control, hyper protective, over controlling the youth. So you see the it's wonderful, the new dimension of mother, but if it's it's a nest, it becomes in a certain way a burden, because it's a nest that the youth will never leave the house. And then another relation between permitting and the asymmetry is lost between authoritarianism and permissivism. Permissiveness. So we turn out to be too critical, and we should try to see how we could reread the preventive system, how could enhance the instruments of the preventive system. We see that system harmonize all the resources, enhance the balance that we are losing right now. Therefore, we need serious questions. For example, the classical meanings we give to the category father, mother, brother, sister, friends, that describe the Salesian educator, how could we translate them today? Is no longer the father of the 20th century or the mother of the 50s. So we should try to rethink of the youth protagonism, that it's not only having a youth center, ideal youth-centered, the youth that the young person that will love it, but also the young person that rebels, resists, contradicts, criticizes you. We should really hear the youth when contradicts us, and we should enhance the dialogue with us. So how could we rethink the relation in the educational system, in the family, and in the family, to live positively the family as well. And then I came to 4 proposals that I had already mentioned before, and these are 4 proposals that are certain kind, a certain time, in a certain way, are provocations. And I think that this is 4. On one hand, we have to recoup the intergenerational alliance that gives us some more security as adults that have to educate, are called to educate. And then there is also a fundamental issue that we have to privilege integrated approach, different life contexts. So the environment should be taken into account. And therefore, we should recoup the convention Salesian educators have in them, but the privileged human being, the privileged thing is life, because stability and continuity add to the preventional system what they really need, what the youth and parents need. So this cohabiting, this co-living is important because it's a very environment where we can listen to each other. And therefore, the awareness of themselves in a context, not only occasional relations. This being there, being always there, means be careful of the Salesian that works at the office, that take an appointment with the youth. This is not our side. Bureaucracy, red tapes must be left in the hands of the administrators, the laity. An educator, Salesian educator, must live among youth people, young people, because this relation has to be built throughout time and for everybody, because a minority can become a risk. So, according to the priority choice of the educators, it was chosen in the chapter as a priority. I remind you that before educating the others and managing our own growth in all the aspects of person, this is also means learning. And comparing to the specific task of the educator, we could hint at the reasonableness, not just rationale, not just for the educator, to put together the skills of theoretical knowledge with the concrete, concrete challenge that I encounter daily, the so-called practical wise approach. So the very moment in which people or the young people can decide in the very moment, thanks to a real experience, where and then the care of the quality of the behaviors and the forms of communicating. And here also we can also consider the love and kindness that was repeated so many times today. Pedagogical love, a strong love, is a demonstrated love. In order to be effective, has to have a complexity of human features, sincere, not ambiguous, able to express trust, and most of all, and I love it, and this is come come from Herbert Franta, must express the idea of unconditionality. I love exactly as you are. There is no condition in my caring. This is a powerful love. All this as unconditional love pushes to place where the youth feel understood, love that can generate positive energy. Means that with the love that we are giving to them, we can generate the love of existing, and only that joy of existing that comes from being loved makes people, the young people, to love. So survey said that who was loved feel less threat, is more inclined to help others, and then I get to the last part, the sharing of existential experiences which guide life's choices. So if this presentation wouldn't have any meaning if we couldn't succeed to convince the youth that life is a mission. So I feel realized when I see that the young people live the values that I incarnated. You are a mission, said Pope Francis, and Don Bosco also said it. And so the last objective is to help young people to make themselves independent, able to face life, to live for open sea, and be responsible and take their responsibility towards the world. So to get over infantile behaviors. This is a process of reinterpretation, a broader sense of the reinterpretation of the religion. That is the third element of the preventive system, the ethical, religion ethical context. So we are working in multiple religious contexts. So this broader context, which is able to embrace the need of sense of the young people, the youth, so it's a very important question that need to be responded, and it's like a beacon. Don Vecchio says we have to place our tents in the young world, in the world of the youth. We don't have to be scared if we want to be more in a network and more at the global level. It's true the challenges are at the world level, but it's also the globalization of good can also be carried out at global level. So we should touch all the young people. Our founders could not do that, but today we could do it. We could manage to do it. Sometimes we feel tired. But really, we can feel confused, but our preventive system is our precious. It's a kind of Damianis that becomes our constant praying. It's the source of our faith for God. So our path is on a slope, but we are achieving our goals because God is with us.
Thank you, Sister Piera, for this marvelous presentation, these wonderful remarks that brought us in the depth of this debate. And now the last remarks, which is extremely interesting because it is entitled From Presence to the Presences, plural, starting from a concrete example shows the importance of being in a network and sharing educational resources. Aldeira Aparecidas Berga, FMA, and executive director of the Rede Salesiana de Escolas de Brasil. with an articulated preparation, cultural preparation, and a great professional experience behind her. Finally, I can see you in person, because in the past I just met you in a remote connection. Now it's better, definitely. Thank you so much for this invitation. Thank you for allowing me to be here. And this marvelous congress, I want to say hello to everybody here, those connected from other countries, and especially Brazilians who are following us. Talking after Sister Piera is a great challenge. Wow, really, she's a great teacher. I will talk according to 3 points. The first part starting from the experience of the Mornese community, then the community dimension in the formation of the person, then educational resources in the community, and some perspectives for our institute. From presence to presences, the educational resources of the community of Mornese is the icon of the charismatic force of the Institute of the FMA, which qualifying itself as an educative pastoral community from its origins, has assumed the educational action as a theological place in which God manifested himself, called Mother Mozzarella and the first sisters, and entrusted them some young women from Mornese to be guided on their path to formation. As a co-founder of the Institute, Mother Mozzarella opened herself to the divine action, and step by step she made herself virtuously available to God, letting herself be guided by a strong experience of apostolic charity and an ardent missionary drive. This experience, shared in community, took shape in a climate of true unity, so that life in Mornese became the prototype of a fertile land where the charism sprouted, strengthened, fructified, and spread to all the continents. This is how, from Mornese, a window opened to other cultures. Horizons were broadened, and we become aware of the clamor of the times and places, and we are sowed, in a way, in more distant lands, and the Salesian educational mission takes roots all over the world. First point, from the presence to the presences. Both the FMA in Mornese and the Salesians in Baldocco were born from a very intense community experience. In fact, this dynamism of community life and apostolic life was operative in Chieri, Baldocco, Mornese, and Nice, both among the youth of Don Bosco and among the young women of the first communities of the FMA. The atmosphere of the foundation of the Institute, which arose from the first community, was marked by a dynamism of charity and by an ardent missionary zeal, which gathered poor, humble, fragile women with a little heritage culture, thanks to maternal, educational, and governmental management of Mother Mozzarella. We Mornese wisely promoted a style of communion that involved the whole community in participating in the educational program. The style of communication and participation favored by the formative and personalized art of Mother Mozzarella allowed the original community to live the family spirit that promoted relationships that were covered with simple frankness, bluntness, transparency, sincerity, mutual trust, positive relationships, allowing to enhance both personal resources and structures favoring communication and decisions to be taken together. Then in the Institute, since the very origins, Mother Mozzarella is recognized as the mother, and she is remembered by the same Salesians themselves as a formative guide, because she included in the Mornese community a profound symphony of projects for the salvation of youth, united the charism of the founder with her own charism, and starting a pedagogical tradition in many respects similar to that of Don Bosco, but with its own female characteristics. Mother Mazzarello strengthened the community spirit by being an accompanying teacher, because she had a very sensitive, affable, patient, welcoming and caring heart. Starting from this experience in the community of Mornese, where the congregation originated from, and then in Nice, where the development of the missionary dimension was consolidated. Well, Mother Mazzarello and the First Sisters opened new windows of opportunity, promoting different presences in the world, where charisma has courageously spread to reach other contexts, cultures and continents. Mornese output, therefore, is the DNA of the Institute, which, after only 5 years from its foundation, the FMA were already in America, in Asia, in Oceania, in Africa, with the enormous flowering of vocations and attraction of young people to the recently established homes and works. This openness to the planetary dimension was for the Institute an effective means to overcome nationalism and prejudices and to discover also the richness of the social cultural diversity of each nation, which allowed to establish itself as an international institute unified by its charismatic identity and fruitful aspect and its educative pastoral mission, realized with the leadership of the communities. In this way, the community dimension pushes the life in Mornese to become a space for formation and self-formation for its members, and it is one of the educational resources that most favors the combination of evangelizing by educating and educating by evangelizing. From these characteristics of Mornese's life, it is clear that this lifestyle in the community is one of the most effective resources for the formation of the people who make it up. Second point, community dimension in the formation of the person. The community is fundamental for human formation and possesses essential and indispensable resources for an integral education. In order to consolidate this reflection, I will resort to the idea of conceptions of the philosophers and educators Edith Stein, who, thanks to her broad vision of human nature, described in a solid way, based on perennial principles, the most appropriate means and resources for training and for integration, personal integration, social integration. In the Steinian conception, no one is formed without the mediation of the other. The person, by nature, is a social being, and by human structure cannot live without being in relationship with other people. Therefore, coexistence is essential for human formation, and each individual can humanize himself, herself, only in a portion of humanity, drawing benefits from the cultural matrices that the the community of origin grants him or her. There are various forms of social organizations, just like the mass, society, community, and the state. According to Stein, the community is the ideal form of human coexistence because all the people are involved and feel they belong to that group. But this does not mean that it is any kind of community. The ideal is that the community has a high performance, which essentially arises when the union between people takes place through the community life of the soul. That is, from the union of totally free people linked together by the personal life, which is more intimate, or life of the soul, where each of them feels responsible for himself, herself, and for the community as a whole. The community life of the soul is not guided by some psychic attitudes, but by those that refer to the spirit, which requires reflection, criticism in favor of building a project in view of the common good. The formation of this kind of community is not something spontaneous, and therefore it requires a joint action, just like in a family, where blood ties are not enough to have a community experience. This means that the subjects who come together to live community life are not addressed to each other as an aggregation of people or an agglomeration of strangers with unequal relationships, but they gather with the aim of fostering the full growth, the development of its members, and the proper conditions that contribute to this. If an individual does not find in the community to which she belongs the suitable ground to develop his gifts, which could, of course, be useful to the whole community, this is mainly due to a factual imperfection of that community, which is unable to use all the forces that are present there. However, this is not a defect that is inherent in it as a community. It's not yet sufficiently developed. That is, the community has not yet achieved the result it could achieve indeed. In the community, relationships are authentic and profound. The union between the members emerges from positive dispositions because they are unions which are anchored to the nucleus of persons, and therefore these are dispositions that start from the soul and go towards the soul of the other individual, that is, towards the most genuine interiority of that person. It is in this sense that science says that the goal of the community life is essentially a community life of the soul. And this happens because everybody wants a community life. Community has a soul, therefore, because it is anchored to the soul of each person, and it has a spirit, because people are free to act and position themselves. Having a soul also means having a center within yourself, a focal point from which your decisions are taken, and having a spirit means that it is configured as a personality which is constituted on the basis of freedom and awareness of its members. The novelty of this union lies in the fact that the coexistence is truly community, means community when the members conceive the others as a subject and do not relate to them in the same way they relate to a to some submissive and dominated being. Nobody has therefore to give up to their personality, because in the community people are totally free. They are linked to each other by the life of the soul, and each individual considers the other as a human being equal to himself, herself, feeling responsible for himself or herself and for the entire life of the community. When one is open to the other, there's no repression, and this is a strong characteristic of the community, which searches continuously for the good of a community and putting all its strength at the service of the community. These activities foster the personal formation and the development of community life, where there is a co-responsibility between individuals, and one helps the other to get to know each other better, to perfect themselves in a total climate of tolerance and forgiveness. This is why in community life, openness to objective world is important to the world of values, and in this sense, each individual is considered by Steiner as an organ of the community, because he can activate the richness of his own interior life, externalizing it for the sake of others. Stein also states that the more the life of the community penetrates into the deeper extracts of the personality, the more deeply the individual is also permeated by the character of the community, and the more it is correct to speak of the character of the community. So thanks to these characteristics, it can be seen that the community life is formed through the character of single individuals, but the community also forges the character of the individual, changing him for the better when necessary, and if necessary, educating people to become members of the community. Without the community, without social life, therefore without the education of individuals to become members of the community, the ultimate goal of the human being cannot be achieved. Each person can develop his own humanity just through the mediation of his peers, and it is essential. This is the non-self-sufficiency of the human being that constitutes him as a naturally social being. However, the formative process mediated by the community life does not form the whole person all at once, or once and for all. Let's say it is indeed a gradual and continuous process carried out with the accompaniment, so that people discover in the community dimension the focal point is sacrificing themselves through tireless fraternal and generous services in favor of the neighbor. In the same proportion, in several other aspects, it is also represented the opposite, extremely selfish, consumerist and individualistic people, slaves to the desire for possession and the search for easy comforts, do not live for the good of the community, but seeking personal interests and comforts. They corrupt themselves and illegally appropriate what is really collective, usurping the rights of others and fraudulently violating what is not theirs. This shows that without the personal effort, ethics and morals, that is, without living the real level of the spirit, which is the level of reason, of will and the intellectual faculty, community life is not possible. And in most of the cases, not even the person develops according to the underlying human structure. Stein affirms that whoever manages to free himself from all attachment to temporal goods will attain freedom of spirit, clarity of reason, calm, peace and tranquility will increase the joy that the misery will never try and experience, because who is free appreciates goods in their value, the true value. These reflections show that the person needs to be included into a world, the world to know better, to better know his inclinations, and by participating in social life, he and she must make the choices in an increasingly cautious way to continue to improve. Stein affirms that the preciousness of community life is based on the experience of values, thus expressing that the community is precious. The more precious it is, the higher its values are, and the stronger the commitment to them is. If the life of man and that of the community are full of values, well, it has a value too. In light of this, it is possible to understand that a person aware of his own way of being assumes with the higher maturities functions in the community, both to carry out an activity in favor of the community and to feed the community with the values of one's character, thus with the awareness of belonging to a people, the real responsibility and the need for personal evaluation starts. It is the awareness of being a member of a community of people that arises in the individuals, an attitude of self-assessment of their own conduct in relation to humanity, since the structuring of the community depends on the free will and the character of individuals. To become part of the community and develop a personal uniqueness. To achieve the community purpose, there is a need for constant development in two directions, broadening the horizon that surrounds us, and on the other hand, digging into the interior. Thus, an intimate interaction between intersubjectivity and personal interiority is much needed. It is essential to be included in a community to enrich oneself with its community personality, and at the same time it is necessary to bring out one's own note identified with the personal uniqueness, which is the core of the personality. People take advantage of the character of the community to make their uniqueness blossom, and at the same time they enrich and shape the personality of the community from its inner core. Ultimately, however, it is people those who shape the community by giving it a clear aspect. Furthermore, the community must be aware that each person has their own autonomy from the community, which is their point of reference. Each has their own personal identity that does not merge with anything else. Thus, the community becomes a propitious ground for individuals to develop their own gifts, which in general can be useful for the entire community. This is why we can say that the community dimension contributes to the formation of the person, and the more this community is rich in values, the more it pushes its members to develop the resources and the potential. It is therefore totally different to cultivate intersubjective relationships or not, or to participate or not in social and planetary and social proposals and initiatives, because only those who interact with others, participate and live in community, thus making a story of personal growth. A third point,
the educational resources of the community. The community is a space, a rich space of educational resources. This is because each member of the community has with them his own personality that is made of original nucleus that's not irreplaceable, and it expresses itself as a vital source, typical qualities, genuine potentials, artistic endows, and other sources, vital resources that are present in each person. This characteristic, identity of characteristics, makes for the person not only only potentials, so they are not fully growth. They must be activated, but outer conditions, and from educators, so that can be reawakened and updated, so that the person can become what was born for, what is on this deontological base and in his own nature. Therefore, the community is necessary as a source for educational resources, because by collecting people have talented that sometimes are latent, and being a vital community, the community develop a path and a formational path to help skills to be developed and the qualities of each human being as an educational community. Nevertheless, due to the originality of each person, as Simon says, we cannot educate with a common goal as according to a general scheme, being aware that the community is a huge resource for the person, and a well-educated person and formed plays a more civical roles, and therefore agency are promoted. They have to promote integral education for kids, young, in different cultures and worlds in which operate. In front of so many and tragic world situations which cause a sense of vulnerability in the present and in the uncertainty for the future, the FMLC Institute sees the urgency to promote action that can help to reverse the curse of human history and save the planet, which is at risk. Therefore, the capitalists, there are questions about such challenges. During the 24th General Chapter, decided to mirror discerning the possibility of collaborating to build up a new orientation for humanity, and they opted for 3 priorities, which are focused on the prophecy of the present for promising action in the coming years in the countries which they operate. These are relive and bear the witness of the beauty of the Salesian vocation, whose objective is to be qualified and to promote reasons for life and hope among young people and their families. Acquire missionary synodality on a personal community level with the aim of promoting a culture of dialogue inclusion, reciprocity, cooperation, and democracy. Listen to the cry of the young, of the poor, of the earth, to make courageous evangelical choices within integral ecology. With all these points, it is proposed to collaborate in a social transformation by building a sustainable, equitable, and peaceful world. So this action suggests to rethink, as an educating comedian, the missions, structures, activities, strategies, and places to invest the greatest human and financial strength in view of constructing, setting up evangelical process. So the convention is that this new reality and this new humanism will be possible through the strengthening of the prophecy of the present, so the community that plans and rely and set up through the network, both at the Salesian family and the partnership with others, together with the Church, in commitment in public policies. And as a Salesian family, we already have reached the experience of networking, such as the one of the provincial conferences that seek improvement and innovation, which as to the giving new meaning to educational mission in different continents. As educational experiences, we have, for example, the experience of the American Salesian School, which has recently set up a strategic plan and training project for leaders and educators for all over America. In Brazil, we have the Brazilian Salesian Network, which was born actually from a provocation of the ESA meeting back to 2001, and is a civical and juridical institution that was established between the FMA and Salesian of Don Bosco and promotes action in field of education. So it has also an office that organizes and promotes actions at various levels, and also publishes a house that produces books for 105 schools, and is a source for sustainability and education mission, reimagine and co-creating in community the future of education. In the conviction that education is the key to the integral formation of human beings, the chapter members understood that the preventive system continues to be relevant for its humanizing power. They underline the commitment to accept the stimulation invitation of Pope Francis Laudato Si as a common good and a universal right. And also the last UNESCO report, Reimagining the Future on Education Together. It was drawn up by an international commission that was helped from thanks to the consultation of over 1 million people. So the report highlights that the world is a crossroad as high living standard coexists with huge social inequalities, and the basic structure of civil society and democracy are eroding in many places around the world. Therefore, innovations are not adequately addressed towards equity, inclusion, and democratic participation, and education is still not fulfilling its promise to help building a future that are peaceful, just, and sustainable. Another challenge for us is that for the educators and the education institution is that artificial intelligence, AI, automation, and the structural transformation organizations change the employment scenarios around the world. So while conceiving that digital technology have in a certain way redefined the way humans beings interact, live and learn, they bring a huge innovation potential. It's not been discovered yet how to combine these new technological resources with persistent poverty and growing inequalities by creating further pockets of exclusion, injustice, and social marginalization. Now, how could we combine, how could we keep on, also for the report, how could we keep on doing? What should we give up? What should we continue to do? What do we need to reimagine it in a more creative way? All actors of education in different contexts are invited to give answers. So in this sense, I'm approaching the end. The challenge for the Institute is to promote, as the report and Salesian report and pedagogy itself suggest, the pedagogy of solidarity, the pedagogy of participation, the pedagogy of cooperation, the pedagogy of hope and the environment, the pedagogy of care. So always aiming at inclusive and intercultural education, human rights education, social and moral education, learning at the service of building active and responsible citizenship and on the care of a common home. So this is really the main issue proposed and started by the charismatic charisma of Mornese, which was established as the House of Love for God and decided for a pedagogical spirit experience. So the fruits have sprouted, the Salesian educational work have spread and become a bridge, a point of reference for quality social education. Moreover, it was possible to feature the educational resources of the community. Today, after 150 educational life, the Institute is opening itself to a profound evaluation of its history, its mission, its expansion, its pedagogy, and its social and ecclesial commitment. That's why the Salesian preventive system grow and grow, not only by developing new convincing plans and ingenuity, but also by promoting a new project that might transform the lives of people in emerging reality, which will be based on social, economic, and environmental justice, and aim at building futures that are inclusive, just, democratic, and sustainable. So all together, it is possible we can create a new humanity that was dreamed by God and all citizens of the world. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you, Suor Adele, for this rich presentation, which really put the accent on, focus on the highlight De La Croce and the Stein, so these two authors. So it's extremely stimulating what you said. As due to time reasons, we really are not thinking about further debates. There was just one question, and maybe is the only answer that we ask both of you. Many FMA, but not only them, they are very busy, that they seem to have no time to find themselves among the young people. How can make them understand that without the real presence with youth, education cannot be carried out? Well, I don't know what we could do. We should try the answer. Well, I think that in these days we kept on talking about the effects, relapses, the fallout that we should try to read. So the impacts, the effect that follow to our acts in the interlocutors. So I think that is the life, the reality that will tell us and will sort of say if we keep on being so hectic, we should stop because we could run the risk of fall down. So we will be a kind of, we will be sterile in a certain way, unproductive. So actions becomes activism. And this was a risk that Don Bosco was saying. They understood that they had in their mind is the activism as a degeneration of active spiritualization, which hope to conjugate Martha and Maria, couple Martha and Maria, but is not able to do it. So if we do think that our being busy do not lead to much, do not produce much, produce, as the Bible and the Gospel say, the Bible says wind. We have to understand that it's not in to do, it's to doing that leads to a transformation in our young people, but is the being. So not only doing, but being. So the life teaches. And so some contexts in which the Institute has all the works, then we have to rethink, because life tests us also. We don't have the magic stick. So we are going under metamorphosis. I think that we have to enhance our core, our nucleus, to will drive us for tomorrow's Institute. Thank you very much.
Menos é mais, não dizemos em português. Vou falar em português, fica mais fácil. Devemos fazer escolhas e devemos trabalhar em comunidade para chegar a essas conclusões.
Bene, avete visto nel programma che c'era scritto conclusione del moderatore, non conclusioni, perché il campo è aperto, work in progress, no?
Okay, so the director of my Salesian community, when I was in the post-novitiate, while formatting us in the experiences to be made through the internship, he was telling us through a slogan that you can see. I still remember after many days, being apostles means to be apostoli means you can stay peacefully sitting there. It's a pun word in Italian. It's a joke with an Italian word apostoli. You can stay peacefully in your place, so don't move. And it also deals with the role of parents in the family, with their qualitative role in the family, not quantitative role in the family. We have to consider and to ponder all these elements, and I want to conclude. I always remember the word assistance, on which we have said a lot of things today. Etymologically, it means ad sisto, means I stay in a stable way, so a stable love, close, I stay nearby, I stay close to what, to whom, to all the other things. I mean, meaning that we assisted someone, and this is the idea of the disciples of Emmaus. When in the Exodus 3:14 it is said, I am what I am, in front of a saturated land where we have to be humble, and we also spoke about humbleness in the educational role of the teacher, where I am what I am, and says a lot of things regarding a presence which is actively and proactively present there. So I am there with all the richness of my person, in the case of God, of the perfection of the love of God, and then we try to do and give our best. So thank you, because behind this presence assistance and this idea of being there, which is a philosophical topic, there is also our life experience and our daily life that has been recalled many times today. So we deserve a bit of relax now. Thank you for your presence and your attention. A special thanks to all who intervened today, Her Excellency, and I wish you all the best for the continuation of this great event. Thank you.